And he goes for a spin on Sarah's bike, and guess what happens? At 11:50 next Tuesday morning. Back in time 450 years now on BBC Two. Street life for the Tudors in Zig Zag.
Hello, I'm Mark.
And I'm Marsley. Today we're going to find out what streets were like in Tudor towns.
That's right. Can you imagine a high street without your favourite shops, with no fast food restaurants and no buses or cars? Well, none of these things were around 450 years ago, and our towns and cities were much smaller than they are today. This is a map of England and Wales drawn in the 16th century. You can see that most people lived in villages scattered across the countryside. The biggest town was London, followed by Norwich. Others were Shrewsbury, Chester and York. Your challenge today is to visit some of these towns and discover what a street was like in Tudor times. Go to York and discover why streets were filthy in the 16th century. Visit the Tudor houses in Shrewsbury and find out what kind of people owned them. And finally, travel to Norwich and find out how the poor lived in the 16th century. You will find the answers by looking for clues from the past, which are still around us today.
Okay, let's get to work.
We start our Tudor challenge here in York, one of England's oldest cities. This is York Minster. Thousands of tourists visit every year, but I'm not one of them. We're here to find a Tudor street.
And here it is. This is the Shambles, one of the few streets in the country to survive from Tudor times, which might explain why it's so popular with the tourists. When you look closely at the buildings, you can see signs of their Tudor past. The wooden beams and the upper floors that stick out into the street. I'm surprised by how narrow it is. I wonder if all Tudor streets were like this.
Well, Marsley, I found a clue in this book. Listen to this. Both sides of the street are crowded with cottages and alleys. In some places, the road is not wide enough for carriages to pass. That was written in 1603 by a man called John Stowe. He was writing about streets in London, but he could easily have been talking about this street here in York. If London and York had narrow streets, maybe most towns did.
Another thing I've noticed is that all the buildings have shops at street level, and it looks like people live above them. I wonder if they had shops in the 16th century and what they sold.
The Shambles, the ancient street of the butchers of York. It takes its name from the word shamel, meaning the stalls or benches on which the meat was displayed. The shops did exist in Tudor times, and according to this, they were all butchers' shops.
These must be the benches where the butchers displayed their meat. And look up there, you can see the hooks that the meat was hung from. Just imagine, in Tudor times, every shop in the street was a butcher's shop. But that doesn't help us with our first challenge. We have to find out why the streets were so dirty.
Well, Marsley, the butchers were partly to blame. Look at this picture I found.
It was drawn in the 16th century and shows butchers killing a cow right outside the shop.
They also kept live animals on the street until it was time for them to be killed. It was the only way to make sure that the meat was fresh. Remember, there was no fridges or freezers back then. And there was no rubbish collection like today. People just dumped the waste in the street. Ugh.
And there were no flushing toilets. Here we can see a woman throwing the contents of her toilet pot out of the window.
Imagine if you were walking underneath at the time. Ugh. But now we know why Tudor streets were so filthy, because people dumped all the rubbish in them and nobody took it away. I think we've solved our first challenge.
Well done. Dirty streets meant lots of rats and lots of work for the rat catcher. This picture, drawn in the 16th century, shows one at work with his dog, his pole, and his catch. There are also pictures of tailors making clothes, of barbers cutting hair, and of men printing books. This is a picture of a shoemaker's workshop, and you can see the shop front where a woman is selling shoes to a customer out in the street. Here you can see bakers at work. They are kneading the dough and dividing it up into little rolls. Then it's ready for the oven.
I've been told that the bakers in here make bread in a similar way, so let's take a look at them at work. You can see them kneading the dough. And they use a machine to divide it into rolls. Then the bread is all ready for the oven. There you go. Thanks very much. It seems that some things haven't changed since the 16th century. People who live in towns prefer to buy their bread rather than make it themselves.
This is Ruth. She also works in a similar way to people in Tudor times.
She's making cheese here on a farm. After a few weeks, it's ready to be sent to the local market in Shrewsbury.
Today, I've offered to do the delivery for her. Shrewsbury, here we come.
I'm already here, and look what I found at the record centre. It's a picture of women carrying food. Perhaps they're carrying it to market. I wonder if they had to travel far.
Well, Marcelly, I've travelled 12 miles. It took me half an hour. And all I've got to do now is deliver the cheese to the right stall.
There's lots of fresh food on sale here, but where's the cheese stall?
This must be it. There you go. Have you got it?
Thank you very much.
I wonder if they had markets like this in Tudor times.
Well, Mark, I found a painting of a Tudor market, but it's held outside in the street. There's the stalls. These women are buying food. And these people are eating and drinking.
I wonder what market day was like in Shrewsbury 450 years ago. Couldn't have been held in here. This is a modern building. So I wonder where it took place.
These documents tell us that markets were held all over the town. This map drawn in the 16th century can help too. The corn market was held on Wednesdays and Saturdays. The apple market was in the High Street, and the butter and cheese market was at the High Cross. Now it's time to move on and tackle our second challenge. We have to find out what kinds of people own the houses in Tudor Shrewsbury.
Well, this is an impressive house, and there's a plaque that tells us who built it. Erected by Richard Owen the Elder, gentleman, Anno Domini 1592. I wonder who he was. It's a pity that plaque doesn't tell us a bit more about him. And here's another big house. But there's nothing that tells us who owned it.
To find out who did own all these big townhouses, we looked at the local records.
Unfortunately, we don't know who lived here because not all records have survived. But this house belonged to a merchant, George Proud. William Jones lived here. He sold cloth. And Richard Powell, a merchant, lived here.
This house was also owned by a merchant, a wool merchant. His name was John Perch. And I think I've solved our second challenge. All these big houses were owned by rich merchants.
Well done. Many towns throughout the country had wealthy merchants who bought and sold goods to make a profit. In this 16th century picture, you can see a merchant in his warehouse. Perhaps these sacks of cloth are about to be sold abroad. Selling wool abroad was how many of them made their money. And ships were sent across the ocean to bring back new, exciting goods from Africa, the Americas and Asia, as well as from Europe. Look at this painting of a merchant who bought and sold all over the world. Around him are the things connected with his trade. You can see written papers, probably agreements, and bills with red sealing wax. And the luxuries he has shipped in: silk, a glass vase, and a Turkish rug.
To find out more about merchants, we've come to the Merchant Adventurers Hall in York.
The hall was built in 1357, but we want to find out how it was used in Tudor times.
This part of the building looks different. The guidebook says it was added by local merchants in 1600, right at the end of the Tudor period.
And here's another clue. Here's a copy of the Charter, signed in 1581 by Elizabeth I. She was the last Tudor queen. The Charter gave the merchants the right to buy and sell all the goods that came into York from abroad, apart from salt and fish.
And look, here's a list of all the governors, including ones from the Tudor period. I wonder what kind of business these merchant adventurers did here in York 450 years ago.
May I offer you a drink?
What is it? Some local brew?
The finest wine, shipped from France.
Then perhaps I could try a glass. So how's business? I see you're still trading in the cloth.
Ah, yes, Robert. Woolens and linens. And business has never been better. Isn't that right, Henslow?
Yes, sir.
So how many people work for you?
We've got 75 spinners working for a penny a ball of yarn, 38 weavers earning 3 pennies per length of cloth, 17 dyers earning 2 pennies per length.
Then we take them to the continent. To France, Flanders, to Spain, where we make a good price.
I'm sure you make a good price. But what would you say if I could offer you the chance to make 10 times that price?
I would say it was impossible. What do you say, Henslow?
Perhaps you should hear your cousin out, sir.
Thank you. Put some of your cloth into a ship of mine and sail it to the New World, where we can trade it for the most wonderful goods. Spices, sugar, silver, and silk fit for the Queen herself.
But think of the risk. What if we lose the ship?
But what if we succeed? We will bring home a ship loaded with goods we can sell for a fortune.
It's a very tempting offer, Robert. But I can't take such risks.
It would be a great deal of money.
Yes, indeed it would, Henslow. A great deal of money. But at what risk, Henslow? And at what cost?
A successful merchant was very likely to be made mayor of his town, and I've come to Norwich to find out about one of them. This is Robert Janis. He was obviously important because he had his portrait painted. In fact, he was one of the wealthiest men in Tudor Norwich and was twice the town mayor. And here's a copy of his will, written in 1530. He left money to the church, to the hospital, and to set up a grammar school. And he also left 4pence to anyone who was blind, lame, bedridden, or a prisoner in the castle. Fancy leaving money to the prisoners in the jail. I wonder if all merchants were so concerned about the poor.
Are you sure you will not reconsider my offer?
I've made my decision, Robert. The answer is no.
Then you will always remain a small town trader. The real riches await men of courage like myself.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Come here. Oh, come on. Come over here. I found him asleep in the stable, sir. He must have been here all night.
What do you want, boy?
A groat, sir. Can you spare a groat? My family's starving.
Don't think it's from these parts, sir.
Do you not know the law, boy? Beggars must stay in their own towns. I will take him off your hands, William. I'll lead you to the edge of town.
That won't be necessary. The boy is local. I've known his family for many years. His father died of the sweating sickness, and his family have no wages coming in.
It seems we can agree on nothing. Good day, cousin.
In future, Henslow, keep such information for my ears alone. Now take the boy inside and see that he's fed and given bread for his journey. And remember, boy, the punishment for being caught begging outside your own town is severe. God forbid that a man like Robert Elliot should ever catch you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Here in York, I've discovered that the merchant adventurers were very concerned about the poor people of the town. They paid for the running of a hospital right here in this room. But it wasn't like the hospitals we know today. It was more like a shelter for the poorest people of the town.
And we have these two letters from a man and a woman begging the merchants to give them a bed.
Unfortunately, we don't know if these letters were ever answered or if the man and woman were accepted into the hospital.
There are very few clues to tell us about the lives of the poor in Tudor England, so this document is extremely valuable to history detectives like us. This is a survey about the poor people who lived in Norwich in 1570. It tells us a lot about who they were and how they lived.
There was the Smith family. Anthony Smith, mason, is laid up with gout. He is 50 years old. His wife is also 50. She spins white warp. Their 11-year-old daughter knits stockings. They have lived here for 40 years and are fit to work, but they receive no help and are very poor.
And I think I've solved our final challenge. I found out how the poor lived in Tudor Norwich from this survey, which you can still come and read today.
The Tudors treated poor people in different ways. If you were fit to work but caught begging, you could be whipped out of town. However, if you were disabled, widowed with children, or blind and unfit for work, the Tudors believed you deserved help. In the Tudor period, laws were passed to control the poor. People with no money could only beg in their hometowns, and they needed a license to do it. Later on, laws were passed to help the needy, and richer people were forced to pay money to help the poor.
Our challenge today was to find out what streets were like in Tudor towns.
So we travelled around the country looking for clues in many different places.
We found them in wills, in documents and pictures, and in streets and buildings which still stand today.
And we discovered that streets in Tudor times looked very different from today.
We went to the Shambles in York and found out that Tudor streets were narrower than today and much, much dirtier.
The buildings were timber framed and people used them to live, work and trade in.
And we found out about Tudor markets. They were usually held on the street where crowds gathered to buy all kinds of food.
In Shrewsbury, we discovered that the large townhouses were built by rich merchants who made their money from buying and selling things. We even found out what their names were.
And in York, we came across the merchant adventurers. They became rich by trading with countries overseas. We discovered how some rich merchants tried to help the poor. And in Norwich, we found out what happened to those poor who didn't get any help.
Do you like the kind of streets we have today?
Or would you like to have lived and shopped in a Tudor street 450 years ago?
Of
course, there was no TV in Tudor times, so what did the people do for entertainment? Find out next Tuesday on Zig Zag at the same time, 12:10, BBC Two. This is BBC Two, taking a working lunch.